You're turning the news on every day. You're seeing all this like really crazy, difficult stuff. And it felt sort of like this sense of knowing, okay, no matter what's going on, I can go outside and like my flowers are blooming. And it gave me this sense of purpose and this sense of hope that I had lost for a while.
Welcome to Seacoast Stories, a podcast about the people, businesses, and newsmakers that make the Seacoast an American hidden gem. I'm Trey Farkas, and on today's episode, how the pandemic and a near-death experience led Bridget and Robbie Jenkins to turn their someday dream into reality. I want to tell you about the day that changed my life forever. On a Saturday night in upstate New York in 2012, a drunk driver sped across 3 lanes before striking a black SUV in the driver's side, tossing the car into a ditch, destroying the vehicle, killing 2 teenagers on impact, and severely injuring 2 more. December 1st, 2012 is a day I will never forget because it's the day I lost my best friend, Deanna Rivers. In the ensuing weeks, as our community mourned the loss of Deanna and a young man named Chris Stewart, I learned a harsh lesson which now serves as the foundation for how I approach every single day. Life can be taken from you or your loved ones at any moment, so live accordingly. It's why I say yes to all opportunities that come my way. It's why I squeeze as much into a day as I possibly can. Why I go for the job or the girl or on the trip, even when I probably shouldn't. And it's why I try to leave a good impression on everyone I meet. Because I'm fully aware today could be my last day on Earth. And I don't want my last day to be spent doing something I don't love or surrounded by people I don't care about. We only get one shot at this. And I know it's cliche, but I truly believe in living your life to the fullest. Even though I learned this lesson in devastating fashion, I'm grateful I learned it at such an early age, because some people go 70, 80 years without learning it, and by then, it's too late. I tell you this story not to make you sad, but because 1, it's a critical part of my story and why I am who I am today. But secondly, because this lesson also serves as the reason why today's guests, Bridget and Robbie Jenkins, started Nowadays Flowers, a microfarm in Dover, New Hampshire. I'll let them fill you in on the origin story, but I want to add one more piece of context. When I hosted my podcast launch party last month, I put out a suggestion box so that attendees could recommend future guests to appear on this show. And the number 1 submission by a landslide was Bridget. And after hearing today's episode, you'll understand why. We're also joined by her husband, Robbie, because without him, there is no Nowadays Flowers. Robbie is a Seacoast lifer, but Bridget, her Seacoast story begins in a city you've heard about on this show a few times already.
I was living in New York City and ready to leave New York City. I had been there for about 8 years and just was really burnt out, worn out of the city living. I really missed nature, but I wasn't quite sure where to go. I was also leaving my job to start my first business and was leaving a relationship and was sort of in this place of where next. And I went to California, I went to Boston, I went to Portland, and my parents kind of randomly retired up here. They were actually living over in China, in Shanghai, and came back, curveball, came back and knew they wanted to be in New England. So none of us had ever lived here before. It was very random. I actually remember on the first day of college, I went to UConn, and my college roommate, well, wasn't roommate that year, but came to be roommate, roommate, one of my best friends, was from Hampton. And I remember very vividly, my dad was moving me into college and we said, where are you from? And she said, oh, Hampton, it's on the beach in New Hampshire. And my dad and I were like, didn't know there was a beach in New Hampshire. And now a decade later, we all live here, which is kind of funny. But I came to visit them and really fell in love with the area and ended up staying. So that's how I found my way here.
When you were living in New York City, you said you were fed up with it. What exactly weren't you digging so much about it anymore?
I think I was really exhausted, and I think it was the culture. And there's so many special things about New York City. I loved it. I loved my time there. I think there was always an expiration date on it for me. I knew it wasn't my forever place, but it was great at the time. I knew after college I wanted to move there. And I think it was just the constant hustle without a purpose. For me, it was very, you go to the same thing every week, right? You go to work really early, you work all day, you maybe have time to go to the gym for an hour before coming home, eating, going to bed, and starting all over. And then the weekends, it was just partying, go to happy hour, and then you're exhausted on Sunday and you start all over again. And that was my life for a long time. And it was fun for a while. And then I think it started to kind of wear on me. And I remember just one day coming home from a trip, I went to Scotland and I came home and I felt I had a panic attack. Like I felt like I was so anxious about coming home. And I think in that moment, it hit me that this was not the place for me anymore. I think my 4-story walk up next to the BQE highway didn't help and paying like an insane amount of rent for that. And I had adopted my dog. So I felt like it was just trying to make this life that I wanted happen in a place that wasn't conducive for that lifestyle. And I just truly I went to the beach one day. You can take the train out to the beach on Long Island. And it was so packed. It was such like a long, hard trip just to go to the beach for a little bit. And I just remember thinking like, this is not it anymore. I missed blue skies and nature. And I think I just got to a point where my lifestyle, it wasn't conducive for that living anymore. And, like I said, the rent didn't help when I was leaving my corporate job and I knew I wanted to start my business. So it was not going to work paying an insane amount to roll the dice on this business.
So when you got to the Seacoast, what were your first impressions of the area and where were you specifically?
Well, I remember this very specific moment of taking my dog to Sea Point Beach and there was no one else there, like not a soul. And I just thought it was the craziest thing in the world that I was on a beach and it wasn't crowded. Like there was no one else there. And I remember this feeling of like, oh, this is actually nature. Like this is what I've been missing in my life. I feel like I can breathe a little bit. And so it was definitely that factor, which I probably could have found elsewhere too. It's not like there aren't beaches elsewhere, but it was this combination of nature with a few people that I knew, right? My roommate from college was in Hampton. My parents were here. There was some connection versus Portland where I didn't know anyone or Boston where I knew a few people, but Boston felt almost too similar to New York at the time. Portsmouth really felt like this wonderful combination of things happening, really great restaurants, a lot of activity going on, a lot of culture, but also access to nature and this slightly slower lifestyle that I was looking for.
You said that you had this business idea that you just could not make happen in New York City. What was the idea?
So I was still working my full-time job at the time, and I was then doing this thing on the side, but feeling really unfulfilled by my full-time job at the time. So this business with a partner, we're intuitive eating counselors. So we worked with women around food and body image and helping people really heal their relationship with both. And so I was really passionate about that, still am very passionate about that, and wanted to really give it my all and go all in. But when you're, living in New York City with high rent and high costs of living, it was really hard to just gamble on that, but also trying to split my time between that and a pretty demanding job at the time felt very difficult. And I was leaving a relationship. I just felt like I needed to get out altogether. But that was my first business. Yeah. And we started that in 2014.
Can you explain what exactly being an intuitive eating counselor entails and why you've been so drawn to it?
Intuitive eating is this practice of getting in touch with your body. So tuning out all the noise that we hear and, about what we should be eating, and instead tuning into your own body and listening to what works best for you, getting rid of all the rules and the diets and all the fads and everything, and instead learning how to make peace with food. And it's for everyone, right? But it's really helpful for women or anyone actually in particular, who are struggling with all the rules. So with the amount of brain space that things like, I should be eating this, I should be eating that, I need to eat this in order to lose weight, I need to look differently in order to be happy, like all of that noise, this is really helpful for getting rid of it and instead tuning into your body and making peace so that you can use your brain space for other things and live the life that you want without this nagging drama really around food and body. So I personally had struggled with some of that in my life previously and really naturally fell into it, felt really drawn to it. But I also love helping people. And it was this really nice combination for me of something I felt very strongly about and that had helped me so much, and being able to work with other people around that and help them find the same peace and happiness and contentness in their own lives.
If you don't mind me asking, what exactly were the things that you struggled with and how did you battle through those?
I think I felt a lot of struggle around my identity and worth being tied to how I looked, and especially around body and food being something that needed to be controlled, right, in order to be okay and in order to be safe. So feeling like I was always trying to follow these diets or fads or any sort of rules around food, and sometimes that can get disguised as wellness. I think sometimes it's a very fine line between being interested in the health and wellness space and being caught up in a really harmful way, potentially. So just so much brain space being taken up by, am I eating the right things? If I eat this, how is that going to affect how I look? And it just being this thing that's tied, almost like an achieving thing, like being tied to my identity and my value.
And for the 10 years that you're doing this, did you really enjoy this? Was this fulfilling for you?
It was. I loved it. It was very fulfilling, and it could be very draining too. It could be very, not only just the nature of the work, because you're dealing with some heavy stuff and working with people on some really personal things that are really challenging, right? So could be kind of heavy sometimes. And then I think the business side of it was very challenging sometimes, right? It was a difficult business in the sense of what we were offering. If you think about what we were offering, people aren't exactly knocking down the door to heal their relationship with food, right? That sounds nice in theory, but when you look at what we were actually helping people with, it's this proposition of like, hey, we can help you solve this problem, but you're going to have to give up all your food rules. You're going to have to stop caring about how much you weigh, and you're going to have to maybe like eat some cake for a little while before you heal your relationship with the food, right? It's much more complex than that, but it's not exactly a very shiny offer. So it was sometimes difficult, frankly, to market. And I think that it's a newer area, right? It's not very mainstream when we're up against this billion-dollar diet industrial complex, right? So I think that it was just a tough sell sometimes, and that made the business side of things challenging. It worked for a while. We were really happy doing it, but it was never smooth sailing, I would say.
I'm very curious to know about COVID and how that affected people's relationships with foods. What did you take away?
It was a doozy of a time. All of a sudden, we had people trapped in their houses, all of a sudden working at their kitchen tables next to their pantry, right? So it was a tough time for a lot of people who struggled with food, who I think maybe didn't realize it, or they realized it and it just was exacerbated, right? It was just very challenging. And on the business side, all of a sudden people are getting laid off, furloughed, right? Like it was a really tough time for people in terms of food and body image and their relationship with both. And it was a really tough time for our business because we had a drop in people spending money on things like that. And my whole team was all moms who all of a sudden were homeschooling their kids, right? And didn't have time, understandably, to be in the business as much. So I was carrying a lot of that business and, happy to do so, but I was really, really burnt out and really just struggling with my own mental health at that time. I had another business that was events focused that was dissolved overnight when COVID hit. So some dark days in the start of COVID for sure. Even a few months in, I would say.
Yeah, no one was immune from even those who were most intuitive or self-aware, like yourself. We all struggled. And in a way, that was kind of what made it beautiful, in a way that we were all kind of in this collective struggle and that no one was immune from it. But what did you turn to during the deep days of COVID and when you were burnt out and overworked and dealing with your own mental health issues? How did you get through it?
I should also mention we moved into our house here in Dover in March 2020, days before the pandemic erupted. I remember at our closing, we closed on the 11th and people were kind of joking, about bumping elbows instead of shaking hands. And there was hand sanitizer on the table, but it wasn't anything, like we didn't know what was coming. And then a few days later, it just all of a sudden, oh, okay, we're in this house for the foreseeable future. So we just started gardening and started planting flowers and really found it therapeutic. And it sounds dramatic, but it really saved me during that time. It was what I needed. And it was so healing to just get outside. And anyone who has gardened probably knows the feeling of nurturing something, right? Watching something grow and seeing something bloom as a result of what you planted. And that feeling was what I needed during that time.
Did either of you have any experience gardening up until that point?
I didn't. I'm coming from city living. I was lucky if I got an herb pot out on a windowsill, right? But Robbie, you did. You had a little garden in Kittery.
Yeah, I was living in Kittery before here, and I grew a bunch of vegetables and a few flowers here and there. Growing up, my grandmother was super into gardening, so I feel like I kind of had a little bit of her green thumb. So I had a little bit of experience prior.
So you said it was therapeutic as well and just helped you connect with nature. What are your memories of how exactly you felt those first times that you were watching things grow?
I felt this sense of hope, like things were going to be okay. I felt this sense of peace and serenity that I did not feel in any other part of life at that time. There was something about going outside and every day seeing something new bloom or just appreciating the beauty of what was there that was so important in that time because you're turning the news on every day. You're seeing all this like really crazy, difficult stuff. And it felt so heavy during that time, not only in our personal lives, but obviously the world in general, right? So it felt sort of like this dichotomy to what was happening around us and just really this sense of knowing, okay, no matter what's going on, I can go outside and like my flowers are blooming and this is something to hang on to. And even though that felt, I don't know, maybe that was a little bit naive or something, but it did get me through that time and I felt reinvigorated. I felt for the first time in months after the craziness of all of that, going out there and seeing what I had grown and what was blooming felt like it gave me this sense of purpose and this sense of hope that I had lost for a while.
At what point did you think of this just beyond a hobby?
Fairly early, but not at the start for sure. Like it was definitely a hobby to start. And then I think it was probably toward the end of that summer that I read a book about cut flower production specifically, just sort of fell into this book. And it was this light bulb moment for me, like, oh, this is something that we could actually do. This is something that people actually make businesses out of. And I felt this intuitive knowing of, oh, that's it. That's what I want to do. And it wasn't, I don't think it was surprising because I think I have a business mind where I, for better or worse, have a tendency to try to monetize a lot of things. Like I don't always do it. My brain's always going with ideas and even for other people. And I think it was this very quick realization once I discovered that people are actually growing flowers for production, that that's something that we could do. I don't think we took it seriously for right then and there. It wasn't like we, went and bought a domain name and started immediately, but it was this slow burn from there of thinking, okay, this is really cool. What if we did this someday? We kept saying someday we'd love to have a flower farm. Someday wouldn't that be cool? What if we had that someday? And we probably just had that conversation for a year or two, I think, before really going for it. So it was, it was fairly early on, but then not taken seriously for a couple of years.
Yeah, Robbie, can you remember the first time that sounds like she's had many crazy business ideas? Can you remember when she brought this one to you and what you thought of it at that time?
Yeah, she's a serial entrepreneur, I call her. It's crazy. There's a new idea every day, every morning over coffee. Should we do this next? Now it's all pertaining to flowers, but I don't remember the exact moment, but I'm always on board for something new and exciting. I never turn down anything really. My friends and family call me Hobby Robbie because I'm always doing something new. So she was reading that book, like you said, and she brought me the idea, and I was like, well, let me go build you some beds out back. And I think within 3 or 4 days, we had 6 or 7 flower beds. And I was like, well, I guess we got to start getting after it now.
So Bridget, you said that you guys kind of were thinking about this and thinking about this. What was stopping you from going after it?
I think it was a combination of time. I think I've always felt okay with doing multiple things at once. Like always felt like it was just, I can always do the juggling, right? But that said, it wasn't working great, and it wasn't. Robbie could see that. I couldn't at the time. I think I was so focused and so set on making the other business work that it was really hard for me to give that up. But in the meantime, the flowers we were doing really well. Things were going pretty well. We were having fun. And I think it was 2 years later after we started gardening and growing things that we finally said, why don't we just do it now? After years of saying, let's do this someday. Someday, wouldn't this be cool? We just couldn't not shake the idea, and finally said, why don't we just do it now? I actually looked up the name Someday Flower Farm because I thought that would be a cute name. And turns out there is already a Someday farm in New Hampshire. I don't know anything about them, but there is a website. And then Robbie came up with Nowadays. Like, why don't we just do it now on the property that we have and go for it?
I think also, like, we're growing all these beautiful flowers and we think they're the most amazing things in the world. And then people started to reach out to us because, like all small businesses, we create a Instagram, and be good or bad, you get sucked into that world and you start posting and telling your story and whatnot. And then I think it became more real when we started actually selling the product, right? We're like hearing all this feedback of, wow, these things are so beautiful. Like, florists were coming to us and walking through the garden, and they buy from multiple places throughout New England. And they're like, wow, your flowers are like so amazing. And we kind of just like looked at each other and we're like, man, are we on to something? Like, can we actually do this? So I think that was kind of a kickoff point for sure when people actually started to come and say, can we buy from you?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was a combination of slow burn of just not being able to shake the idea, waking up every day, right? Saying, could we do this? What if we did this? To getting to the point where I just was tired of waking up every day and thinking that. So let's go for it. And then we had a moment where Robbie especially had some perspective about going for it.
What happened?
Oh, my story. Yeah, that was a tough day. So I've been an avid cyclist for probably the last 10 years. That's where my career started in the cycling world, working for a French brand called Mavic. And I really delved deep into road cycling and mountain biking and whatnot. It became part of my kind of day-to-day routine. And I went out that morning, or a few years ago, I went out for a morning ride. We had a big concert to go to that night. And I was like, man, when am I going to get my exercise in? And I was about a mile from home. So I was going up this road that I go up pretty much every morning. And unfortunately, I was hit by a car on my bike. And it's it's 2 years later and I'm fine now, but it's still like the craziest and one of the hardest things to kind of talk about. I went into the front side of the car at around 18 miles an hour, was ejected over the handlebars, into the rear fender, over onto the windshield of the car, totally smashed that in and rolled off the backside. And because of the adrenaline I had just from the whole experience, I popped up pretty quick and like kind of just like wandered around in the middle of the street for a few minutes and then realized what had happened. And then the pain started kicking in, which is not fun by any means. And I just remember the first thought was, I might not ever see my loved ones again, you know? And it's like crazy because I had never been in a situation like that. And I typically get up a lot earlier than Bridget, so it was an early morning ride. And she was like the first thing that came to mind. And then my mom and my dad and my sister and so on and so on. And all these thoughts are going through my head. And next thing I know, an ambulance is there. I'm on a stretcher. I'm in a neck brace. I'm getting rushed to the ER at Wentworth Douglas. You know, the radio is going over, hey, we have an injured cyclist, like all this vernacular of the healthcare world that you like, if you're not in it, you don't know. And it just sounds really scary to you. So I get to the ER, they roll me in. There's 20 different doctors there waiting for me. They're cutting off my cycling gear. They're like searching for internal bleeding. It's literally like a scene out of like any of those like, you know, shows on TV. It was just the most wild experience ever. And for most of it, I'm alone until my dad gets there. And then eventually my sister wakes Bridget up, goes to the house and gets her there. And then I was just in the hospital for a good 5 hours getting like every test known to man done. It was crazy.
And you were fully conscious during all of this?
Yeah. So when they do the internal bleeding test, it's a lot of like prodding you and seeing what hurts, but they also do kind of like an ultrasound when you're having a child. So they're looking for inflammation in any of your organs or any bleeds. And then after that, I had cracked my helmet actually. So they brought me down for a CAT scan and MRI. They put this special dye in your veins to light you up basically and run you through the little tube for a good 20 minutes. And then, yeah, I had pretty bad concussion, a few days of a very dark room and my thoughts.
So you said that when you initially got hit, your first thought was you would never see your loved ones again. As you were sitting in these rooms for hours and hours, getting looked at by all sorts of people, what were your thoughts?
Once I got to the hospital, I think it was probably about an hour until you got there. And I just remember Bridget coming in and just like, you know, couldn't hold it together at that point. You're so relieved that you're still alive, but also you're seeing your most important person in the world. And then, you know, it's just like, you don't know when you're in the ER. If you've ever been to the ER, they're like doing all these tests and exams. People are running back and forth. The monitors are all going off, beeping. So you're in this like world of unknown. And especially when you get hit by a moving vehicle, the unknowns are just that much more scary, I guess. But it was like a brutal headache for days and days and days, and kind of like sickness associated. And I was up in the bedroom in just a dark room. I couldn't really like leave because any light was making me just feel that much worse. And then I had lower lumbar issues in my discs down there. So I was in and out of a chiropractor and a PT and doing dry needling for like a year's time. And basically like all the muscles had tightened up so much that it was like some days it was hard to walk / like you couldn't bend over type deal. Luckily I didn't break anything. There was some road rash that was kind of severe, but I walked away lucky.
Coming up, why the accident changed Robbie and Bridget's perspective and how it planted the seed for a very popular Seacoast business. Stay with us. This is Seacoast Stories. Hey everyone, it's Troy. A quick word from me, and then we'll get right back to this incredible story. With each passing week I live on the Seacoast, I learn more about all of the incredible people who have stories just waiting to be told here. And it's my goal to make this podcast the number one destination for Seacoasters to share these stories. For me to accomplish that, though, I need your support. And the best way to support this show is to press the follow button on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you want to go the extra mile, you can even leave a rating and a review. I promise every little thing you do makes a big difference in helping Seacoast Stories become the go-to place for celebrating the Seacoast. Thank you so much for the help and also for being here. I really appreciate it. Now back to today's story.
It was a horrible situation, but I look back on it now and I'm actually glad it happened in a weird way, because I had this kind of epiphany throughout the process of being in the car accident and the year-long recovery from all the muscular and whatever injuries. And it helped me realize the importance of, life is fragile, right? And you don't realize it until you get to that point of near death, right? Like, this could all be gone tomorrow. So it helped me just understand like what's really important to me and what just doesn't matter at all. There's like certain things that I used to get super bent out of shape or work. Or,
Like what?
Like, work. I'm in sales, so it can be a grind for sure. And there was times where I would just put that in front of everything and I'd miss out because I'm trying to get a deal done, or kind of like materialistic things. I always had like new toys and whatnot, and all the toys in the world you find out don't matter when you're, facing potentially not living through a situation like your boats and your cars. Like, none of it matters. It's just about, I think your family and what's close to you, and finding that something that you really enjoy to do day in and day out. And after that accident, I was so much more in on the flower thing that Bridget and everybody around me will tell you, if my mind gets set on something, there's no dipping your toe. It's like, I'm going to sprint to the diving board. I'm going to jump as high as possible. And I'm 110% going for it. And I'll put like every last breath, every last being of what I am into making that something work. And I think after I got out of that hospital and got through those few dark days of the concussion, I was like, I love this whole growing thing. I remember coming downstairs from Bridget and being like, okay, so nowadays, like, we're going to go for it and we're going to go hard. Are you ready? And she just looked at me and she was kind of like, had this weird look on her face and was like, are you okay? And I was like, well, I am a little concussed, but I'm clearly thinking right now. And that's when I think it really started to take off.
Bridget, what changes did you see in Robbie after the accident?
I think it was the perspective shift led to this feeling, like asking, am I happy? Am I fulfilled in my day to day? And I think, well, first of all, I got an engagement ring within a week. So
Wow.
it was like,
Was that something you guys had been talking about already?
yeah, I think so. Yeah. No, it was for sure.
I've floated it out about 500 times.
Yeah, but it was definitely, the timing was funny because it was all of these pieces of life that you think about, big picture, what do I want my life to look like? And am I happy? And we get this one shot, right? Like, am I making the most of it? So I felt this sort of enthusiasm, I guess, for life in a different way from him. And a lightness that was more excited about what we were doing versus like looking at it like a chore or something that just gardening to make the front of the house look nice, for example, right? So it was this sort of readiness to do something like this and go all in on this partnership and this idea, this enthusiasm that was not there necessarily before. It was more just like okay, fun thing to do. Let's just tool around in the garden. It was like, no, life is so short. Why are we not going for it now?
When Robbie came to you and said, all right, we're going in on this, what was your reaction?
I mean, music to my ears. Usually he's the one who's trying to slow me down, like bringing me back to earth. So it was the first time I always feel supported by him 100%, but it was the first time I think where I had something that I was really excited about, enthusiastic, that he was equally as excited about and enthusiastic. I think it's because we were doing it together too. So I was psyched and also a little bit of like, okay, like here we go. We're going for it. And luckily by that time we were a little more versed. The growing was going great. We were more versed in the products that we were creating. And like Rob mentioned, the community was really receptive to it. So we were in a really good spot. I was really excited. I think at that point, it was more excitement and enthusiasm than thinking about any of the reality that comes with the business too. And I know I'm familiar with that. I know all the challenges that can come with business, but at that point, it was more excitement, enthusiasm than anything.
When a lot of people decide to turn a hobby into a business, it can create some resentment there for that thing. A lot of people will try to monetize this thing that they had never once thought about monetizing before. And then oftentimes it can be a lot harder than they thought. And then the focus of that thing tries to become making money. And then when they're struggling making money, they lose the love for the hobby. So I'm wondering, has that ever happened with you guys? Have you guys ever lost that joy, that enthusiasm that comes with growing flowers?
No, I've never lost the joy and the enthusiasm for flowers. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't walk out to the farm and feel this intense appreciation for everything and just still feel really grateful and excited about what's growing. I think, and I know what you mean because I can relate to that. And I think that there is sometimes this piece of fatigue or exhaustion that comes from it where I will get to like a Sunday and think to myself, I don't want to go look at a flower right now, or I don't want to go clean up buckets or do the parts of the business that I have to do. Sometimes like there's some sort of light resentment there, I think, but it's certainly not toward the flowers themselves or the joy of growing them. I still feel just as much enthusiasm and excitement. I think it's for me more around bandwidth, honestly. Like I have so much less bandwidth for the actual growing than I did at that time now. So now there's so many pieces to the business that I have to spend time on and focus on, especially as we've expanded into events and weddings and design, where I now have to put so much focus on that and less on the growing itself. So I still wouldn't call it resentment there, just a, I guess, focus split compared to what we were doing the first year. But enthusiasm, no, still feel the same way about flowers.
So you said that when this was just a hobby, people were egging you on to do more with this. And then when you guys became a full-fledged business, it was pretty well received. Up until now, it's very well received. And your services are being used for all sorts of different things, events, weddings. What do you attribute that to? Why are people such big fans of your product?
I think people in this community are really excited about local products in general and supporting small businesses. So we have put a ton of focus on local flowers, and I think people are excited about something that is grown here, that is grown by people that they know versus flowers that are imported from other countries or, who knows where they come from. Of course, anyone can go to the grocery store and buy flowers, right? But that's a very different product than what we're growing here. So I think just in general, the Seacoast is really receptive to supporting small local businesses. I also think people do get really excited about the experience piece. There's a lot of shops and farms, and they're all wonderful. We have so many amazing growers in this area. But I think it's exciting for someone to be able to interact with our products in a way that they might not be able to otherwise. So for someone to come to a workshop, for example, and say, oh, I get to select this stem from the flower truck and then design with it, knowing that that flower is grown here by people that I can meet. I think it's really exciting for people, and it's somewhat unique, and the whole experience is really exciting. And I think that we try to showcase that a lot on our in our marketing efforts. So we're on Instagram showing, from the seed to the bloom to how it's processed to using it in our design work. People like to be a part of that whole process. And I think that resonates with people. So being able to interact with the product in a unique way. This community is really special in the way they support small business. And I don't know that would translate in other communities as much. I'm sure there are some, but in my experience, it's been really special to see people interact with it in a way that resonates.
As you guys reflect on the past few years of doing this, what are you most proud of?
The first thing that comes to mind is working together on this, like the way that it has challenged us.
Safe answer.
Yeah. The way it has challenged us sometimes has led to really strengthening our partnership, I think, and has been something I'm really proud of in terms of the way we communicate and respect each other and learn to embrace each other's working styles, which is not always easy.
If you're looking to strengthen your marriage, I absolutely recommend going into business together.
Really?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've always said I'm never mixing business and pleasure.
Yeah.
I think it depends.
It depends. I think there's definitely hard moments, times, days. But ultimately, I think it's brought us way closer together. And as newly married individuals, it's only been a couple of years now, the ability that nowadays has led to us like figuring out how to communicate really efficiently and effectively, and read each other. Like I'm at a stage early in our marriage that I can look at her and like know exactly what she's thinking or exactly where she's going with this, or like, oh, hey, like, why don't you go get that over here and we can start this next endeavor. So I think going to business with your loved one is a great recommendation to strengthen a marriage for sure.
Love that. Great answer. What are the toughest challenges of running this business?
Of course, we always have challenges with the weather. Like this past spring, we lost the majority of our tulip crop because of drainage, because we had such a wet winter. So there's always heartbreak like that we just can't control.
And for us, I think in general, saying no, because we get a lot of inquiries. And Bridget and I go through it every night and read all the emails and like, oh, we got another inquiry for so-and-so date. And I'll be like, do we have anything else that day? And she'll be like, well, we have this one and then this other. I'm like, okay, let's have a call. Let's book it. So we're not good to ourselves in the sense that we just want to do more. And we love this so much that like we're trying to do as much as possible. So there's definitely been some crazy days of 4 wedding days. They've all gone swimmingly perfect at this point, which is awesome. But there's been some chaotic days and we do it to ourselves. But even the chaotic days are like, it's totally awesome. It's like better than anything.
What makes it worth it?
Everything that's part of this business makes it worth it. Like I've never woken up and just been like pumped to go mow a lawn for 8.5 hours in the beating sun, or call myself the CTO, which is Chief Tractor Officer in my mind, or weed. Like everyone hates weeding and I kind of love it some days. And I just think like for myself I've found out so much about myself through this business. Like I love fostering things and helping them grow. And every year is a new year with a different challenge and you're working against Mother Nature. And it's just like this beautiful, beautiful thing that it's almost like hard to put in words. And you don't really realize like how special it is until you're at the farm 5 a.m. with like this deep, heavy fog going over and the sun rising. And you're like, man, this is the place to be right now. This is awesome. It's so peaceful and it's just so amazing.
It's just fun. Like we just have so much fun and it's exciting every day. Every day is different. Yeah. And I think for me, like even on really tough days when we're stressed out or running around and there's so much to get done, going and seeing a wedding setup come together and seeing how happy someone is with their vision coming to life, or going to a workshop and seeing someone interact with our flowers and create something on their own that they're so proud of and feel really excited to take home. Like seeing someone receive flowers from our farm that they feel really inspired by, like those moments make all of the hard parts worth it. And no matter how tough it gets, sometimes it's that feeling of something magic here, something really special that is tough to shake.
Bridget, I originally reached out to you guys because I hosted a podcast launch party a few weeks ago, and I put out a suggestion box. And I just asked people, hey, whoever you think who's in the area who has a good story to tell, who should I have on? And I got maybe 5 submissions for Bridget and Nowadays Flowers. I can obviously see why, but I'd love to hear from you. Why do you think so many people support you in this business?
Wow. First of all, that's so lovely to hear. And that's so nice. I think I have been, I didn't grow up here. I wasn't born and raised here. And I think when I moved here, I really made an effort to make strong connections in this community and put myself out there and get to know people and learn about them and support them. So I think there's something there about genuine connection. I love supporting local businesses, and I think that that's reciprocated often. People are happy to support us too. So I've made some really great connections. I don't know who suggested us, but I'm sure there were some people there that know us and maybe supported us. And like I said, people are really receptive to local product here, and I think that they're excited about what we're doing because we're excited about it. And I just try to be supportive of everyone and kind and share and advocate for others. So maybe people do the same for us. But I don't know. More than that, I'm not sure. But that's just really lovely to hear.
I mean, I think as an outsider watching Bridget work day in and day out, she's such a grinder and she's so good at what she does and she puts so much of herself into it. I think all of our customers and those who she engages with in the community really realize that, and that she's not just doing it to make a buck. She's doing it because she loves it. And just her work and the way she communicates with brides and her incessant need to make sure that she gets back to a bride or to a customer like sooner than later. It's for better or for worse, 9:00 at night, sending invoices and quotes when we're trying to go to bed. But I think that just comes out with every event that we do and all the product that she puts out in the world. And people see that, they sense it, they feel it, and everybody just loves working with Bridget.
One of my favorite questions to ask people is, and this may be difficult for you, but I'd love to ask anyway. What would you tell the girl who was a city girl and was trying to figure life out and was bopping around these other places after leaving New York City before ultimately landing on the Seacoast, and now where you are now with this business, husband? What would you tell that younger version of yourself?
I mean, if you had told me like 10 years ago when I was just trying to make it in New York and walking up, my 4-floor walk up, like if you had told me I would have been on a farm growing things in the coast of New Hampshire, I would have been so shocked. But I also think I've always been good at following my intuition and trusting my gut. And I think even in those times, I knew there was something different. So I think I would say keep following that, even when it feels really scary and really challenging, and that this isn't it, that there's something better. There's something pretty special waiting for you. You just have to keep trusting your gut and keep following your heart and seeing where it goes and not being stuck thinking, like being open to possibilities. Because I think there were a lot of times that I was really set on just staying in New York, and I was really set on what I thought I wanted to do, and I would do that at all costs, right? I remember thinking one day I was working in advertising at the time, and I remember my boss had her kid in the office. It was like 10 p.m. We would stay so late. I slept some nights in the office there. And I remember thinking, oh, like that is terrible. I don't want that life. But yet I would just kind of doggedly continue pursuing it because I thought that I had to. I thought I was achieving something just to achieve it, right? So I think I would say keep trusting your gut and be open to possibilities and never know what could happen, because I never would have thought this would happen.
We have one final question. We ask this question every week to every guest who appears on Seacoast Stories, and I'll ask it to both of you. Bridget, we'll start with you. What's your mission?
Our mission here is to spread joy and beauty and connection through local flowers. So whether that is connecting with yourself and nature, right? If that's coming to a workshop and finding some peace and joy in working with flowers, or connecting with other people by sending them flowers, or connecting with your flowers at a wedding. I think it's all about connection for us and community here, but really spreading joy and beauty, and doing that through what we have found to be our vessel in flowers.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better than Bridget said it. But I think for me, it's just about getting the joy of flowers out there. It's so special to see the look on people's faces when they get these products, or when they go through their wedding and have the most amazing time, or they see their bridal bouquet for the first time when Bridget brings it to them. It's just, I've never had the opportunity to work a job where day in and day out, it literally brings joy to your customers. Like, people are happy all the time. People are just happy. It's like heaven on earth. Like, you're working something that just brings so much joy. So bringing joy to the flowers, to the community here at the Seacoast.
That's Bridget and Robbie Jenkins of Nowadays Flowers in Dover. After we spoke, Bridget gave me some beautiful flowers, which have definitely added some much-needed personality to my otherwise dismal place in downtown Portsmouth. If you'd like to get some of your own flowers for your place or for the special person or event in your life, visit nowadaysflowers.com for more information, the link to which is in today's show notes. And speaking of getting flowers for someone special, I just had to get Bridget's expert opinion while I still had her. So for today's final question, I asked her, if you're a man and you want to get flowers for a woman, but you don't know what her favorite flowers are, what do you do? Because you don't want to get something too cheap. You also don't want to get something that sends the wrong message, that maybe you're more serious about this than you actually are. It's a tough situation, and I know the guys listening know exactly what I'm talking about, but hopefully Bridget can set us all straight. So this is what she had to say.
There's a few flowers that are controversial.
Oh boy.
So staying away from those. I personally, there's not a flower I don't like, but there's definitely some that are, I think, could be more of a risk than others.
Really?
So,
Please tell.
yeah, something like roses, hydrangeas.
Roses are controversial.
I think so.
Really?
Yeah. You would be surprised at how many brides, and maybe it's just for weddings, right? But how many brides say they don't want roses because they feel like they're kind of the more formal or more dated or traditional. Now, there are not roses that are, or there are some roses that are not that. There are some really beautiful garden roses. And so I think people have this perception of, a dozen red roses as being something kind of traditional, whereas we don't use those roses, but oftentimes people will think of roses in that way. So they can be controversial. Lilies can be controversial, and sunflowers can be controversial.
Those are all the ones I know.
Yeah, stay away from those. You can't go wrong, I don't think, with dahlias. Right now is kind of a tricky time. We're in that in-between season between spring flowers and summer flowers. We're actually starting to get our dahlias in right now, which is the earliest we've ever seen them. Pretty crazy. But I think if you go with something local and beautiful, you can't go wrong. I mean, who doesn't love flowers, right? But there are definitely some to steer clear of. And I would say I'm obviously a little biased, but supporting a local farm over, Trader Joe's or grocery store would always be my recommendation as well.
Thank you, Bridget. You have just saved me and many other Seacoast men from making some potentially horrible mistakes. So I really appreciate the advice and also for sharing your story. I would also like to give Bridget and Robbie an early congratulations because they are expecting a little one in September. So hopefully they can take advantage of some free labor in the near future. Thank you all for listening and for the incredible support you continue to give this show week after week. I keep running into fans of the pod around town, and it makes me so happy whenever I get the chance to meet you. So please, if you see me at a coffee shop, brewery, the library, wherever, please stop me and say hi. I would love to hear your story. Until next Monday, everybody, live free or die.